At 12:47 a.m. on March 15, 1944, Corporal Danny Vasquez crouched in the tree line 200 yards from German headquarters in occupied France. 7 guards patrolled the compound perimeter. Standard doctrine required aerial bombardment or frontal assault, both guaranteed to trigger alarms, destroy intelligence, and kill the resistance contact trapped inside. Vasquez had 90 minutes before the guard shift change. In the next 6 hours, his silent entry plan would save 43 Allied prisoners, recover documents that redirected D-Day planning, and rewrite every special operations manual for the next 8 decades. The officers who mocked him that afternoon would be signing commendation papers by sunrise. Danny Vasquez grew up in the Boyle Heights neighborhood of East Los Angeles, where his father worked the night shift at a meat packing plant on East Olympic Boulevard. The Vasquez family lived in a 2-bedroom bungalow with peeling paint and a chain-link fence that Danny repaired 6 times before he turned 12. His mother cleaned houses in Beverly Hills. His older brother, Miguel, drove delivery trucks for a bakery. Danny spent his teenage years working at his uncle's locksmith shop on First Street, learning to pick locks, study security systems, and understand how people created patterns without realizing it. He noticed things other people missed. The way his high school principal always checked the same 3 hallway doors during fire drills. How the bank's security guard on Soto Street took his cigarette break at exactly 2:15 every afternoon, leaving the side entrance unwatched for 8 minutes. Danny didn't steal. His mother would have killed him. But he understood vulnerability. He understood that every system had a rhythm, and rhythm created blindness. The Army drafted him in January 1943. They made him a radio operator because he scored high on technical aptitude tests, but Danny kept noticing patterns. During training at Fort Benning, he watched how sentries walked their posts. They always paused at corners, always looked left before right, always checked the same shadows twice, but ignored the spaces they'd just cleared. He mentioned this to his platoon sergeant once. The sergeant told him to shut up and follow the manual. Danny shipped to England in September 1943, assigned to the 2nd Infantry Division's intelligence section. By December, he'd participated in 4 raids on German positions in France. Every raid followed the same doctrine: artillery barrage to soften defenses, infantry assault through the breach, accept 20-30% casualties, secure the objective. It worked, technically. They took their objectives. But Danny kept watching men die because the Germans heard them coming from half a mile away. On January 8, 1944, Private First Class Jimmy Brennan from Pittsburgh died in a raid outside St. Lo. Danny had shared a foxhole with Brennan for 2 months. They'd played cards, shared cigarettes, talked about opening a garage, together after the war. Brennan died in the first 30 seconds of the assault, cut down by MG-42 fire before he reached the German wire. The machine gunner had heard the artillery stop, counted to 60, and opened fire at the predetermined coordinates. Textbook defensive doctrine meeting, textbook offensive doctrine. Brennan never had a chance. 2 weeks later, Sergeant Mike Sullivan from Boston died the same way, during a raid on a radio station near Carentan. Danny watched him take 3 rounds to the chest from a prepared position. Sullivan had a wife and 2 daughters. He carried their photograph in his helmet liner. The photograph got soaked in blood before the medic could reach him. On February 3rd, Corporal Eddie Martinez from Albuquerque died clearing a farmhouse that the Germans had already abandoned. They'd left a tripwire grenade in the doorway. Martinez triggered it because he was moving fast, following the doctrine that said speed equals survival in close quarters. The doctrine didn't account for German ingenuity. Martinez bled out before the medic could apply a tourniquet. Danny started keeping count. His unit had conducted 11 raids since December. Average casualty rate, 23%. 87 men wounded, 31 killed. All because they announced themselves with artillery. All because they moved in predictable patterns. All because the manual said that overwhelming force was the answer to every tactical problem. He tried talking to Captain Morrison, the company intelligence officer, in early February. Showed him notes about German defensive patterns, about how they could use silence and timing instead of explosives. Morrison was West Point, class of 41, believed in doctrine the way other men believed in Scripture. He listened for 90 seconds, then told Danny to stick to radio operations and leave tactical planning to officers who'd actually studied military science. "Corporal," Morrison said, tapping his desk with a pen, "the Germans respect strength, not cleverness. We hit them hard, we hit them fast, we accept the casualties necessary to maintain momentum. That's how wars are won." Danny didn't argue. He'd learned that officers rarely changed their minds when enlisted men offered suggestions. But he couldn't stop thinking about Brennan, Sullivan, Martinez. Couldn't stop seeing their faces. Couldn't stop calculating how many more would die before someone admitted the doctrine was killing as many Americans as it was Germans. The problem crystallized for Danny during a briefing on March 12th. Captain Morrison outlined a raid scheduled for March 16th, a German headquarters building in occupied France that supposedly contained intelligence about coastal defenses. Aerial reconnaissance showed 7 guards, probably 1 officer inside, standard security protocols. Morrison's plan: artillery strike on the building at midnight, infantry assault through the rubble, secure any surviving documents, extract within 20 minutes. Danny raised his hand. "Sir, artillery will destroy the documents we're trying to capture." Morrison nodded. "Acceptable risk. We'll recover what we can." "What about the resistance contact? Intelligence said there's a French civilian inside passing information." "Collateral damage, Corporal. War requires difficult choices." Danny felt his stomach tighten. They were going to kill their own intelligence source and destroy the documents they needed, all because the manual said you start every raid with explosives. It was insane. But Morrison had already moved on, discussing withdrawal routes and casualty evacuation procedures, as if losing 20% of the assault team was just another line item in the operation order. That night, Danny couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the locksmith shop on First Street, about his uncle teaching him that every lock had a weakness, every security system had a blind spot. You just had to watch long enough to find it. The German headquarters wasn't impregnable. It was just a building with guards. Guards who followed patterns. Patterns created vulnerability. He spent March 13th studying the reconnaissance photographs. The building was a 2-story French country house the Germans had commandeered, surrounded by an 8-foot stone wall. 3 guards patrolled the exterior perimeter. 2 guards stood at the main entrance. 2 more roamed the interior courtyard. Shift changes occurred at 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. The photographs showed the same guards in almost identical positions across multiple days of surveillance. They were following a routine. Danny started timing the patterns. The perimeter guards completed their circuit every 12 minutes. They paused at the northwest corner for 90 seconds, probably smoking, judging by the posture. The entrance guards stood rigid for 7 minutes, then relaxed for 2 minutes, then rigid again. The interior guards were harder to track from aerial photos, but Danny noticed that lights went on and off in the building at regular intervals. Someone was following a schedule. He drew diagrams, calculated sight lines, measured distances on the photographs using the wall height as a reference scale. By March 14th, he had a complete map of the guards' patterns, including a 40-second window when the northwest corner was completely unwatched, 30 seconds after the perimeter guards left, 10 seconds before they returned. Danny wrote it up as a formal proposal. Infiltrate during the blind window, neutralize guards silently using hand-to-hand techniques, extract the intelligence and the resistance contact without firing a shot. Total time, 90 minutes. Expected casualties, 0. He knew Morrison would reject it. The manual didn't have a chapter on silent infiltration. The manual said you announced yourself with artillery, because that's what armies did. He submitted the proposal anyway on the afternoon of March 14th. Morrison read it at his desk while Danny stood at your attention. The captain's expression shifted from bored to incredulous to angry in about 90 seconds. Corporal Vasquez, Morrison said slowly, are you suggesting we send men into a defended position with no fire support, no covering force, and no backup plan? Sir, the plan is the backup plan. This is fantasy. This is cowboy nonsense. We are not sneaking around like thieves in the night. We are the United States Army. We assault objectives with overwhelming force, not parlor tricks from your locksmith uncle. Danny felt his face flush. Sir, we could save lives. We could. Dismissed, Corporal. I'm moving forward with the original plan. Stick to your radio. Danny saluted and left. But he couldn't let it go. That night, he approached Lieutenant Harold Chen, a platoon leader who'd always treated enlisted men like human beings instead of equipment. Chen was from San Francisco, son of immigrants, worked his way through college before getting commissioned through OCS. He listened to people. Danny found him in the mess tent after dinner, nursing bad coffee and studying maps. He laid out the reconnaissance photos and his timing calculations. Chen studied them for 5 minutes without speaking. Morrison rejected this? Chen asked finally. Yes, sir. Said it was cowboy nonsense. Chen drummed his fingers on the table. It's not nonsense. It's actually pretty solid, but it violates every tactical doctrine we have. Sir, doctrine is getting men killed. Chen looked at him. You understand what you're asking? If this fails, if those guards hear you coming, if anything goes wrong, you're dead. Your team is dead, and I get court-martialed for approving an unauthorized operation. Yes, sir. Why do you care this much, Vasquez? Because I watched Jimmy Brennan die following doctrine, sir. Watched Mike Sullivan die. Eddie Martinez. I can't watch anymore. Chen was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded once. Okay, I'll authorize a small team. 4 men, including you. But understand this. If you get killed, I'm telling Morrison you disobeyed orders. I won't sacrifice my career for a failed experiment. Understood, sir. And, Vasquez, don't make me regret this. Danny selected his team carefully. Sergeant Frank O'Brien from Chicago, former Golden Gloves boxer who could drop a man silently. Private Pete Kowalski from Detroit, worked in his family's butcher shop, knew how to use a knife. Private Carlos Ruiz from San Antonio, moved through brush like a ghost. grew up hunting deer in the hill country. All of them had watched friends die in raids. All of them were willing to try something different. They rehearsed for 6 hours on March 15th, using an abandoned farmhouse to practice silent entry techniques. No talking during the approach, hand signals only. O'Brien would take point, handle close quarters combat. Kowalski would secure the entrance. Ruiz would watch their backs. Danny would handle the resistance contact and any documents. They practiced until every movement was synchronized, until they could communicate with glances. At 11:30 p.m. on March 15th, they blackened their faces with burnt cork and checked their equipment. No rifles, too loud, too cumbersome. Combat knives, piano wire for garrots, brass knuckles, chloroform rags. Danny carried bolt cutters for the lock on the compound gate. They moved out at 11:45 p.m., giving themselves an hour to reach the objective. The night was overcast, no moon. Perfect. They crawled the last 200 yards to the tree line, arriving at 12:35 a.m. Danny checked his watch, counted the guards' movements. The patterns held. Northwest corner blind spot at 12:47 a.m. 13 minutes. They waited. Danny's heart hammered against his ribs. He could hear his own breathing, too loud, too fast. Ruiz touched his shoulder, steady pressure, calming. O'Brien rolled his neck, loosening up. Kowalski tested the edge of his knife against his thumb. 12:46 a.m. The perimeter guards passed the northwest corner, moving east. Danny counted in his head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 30 Mississippi. He tapped O'Brien's shoulder twice. They moved. Crossing 200 yards of open ground in 40 seconds required controlled sprinting in absolute silence. They ran on the balls of their feet, avoiding rocks, staying low. The stone wall materialized out of darkness. Danny's lungs burned. 37 seconds. They pressed against the wall, frozen, listening. No shouts, no alarms. The compound was silent. Danny pulled out the bolt cutters, positioned them on the gate lock. The jaws bit through rusted iron, with a sound like snapping celery, louder than he wanted, but contained. He eased the gate open 6 inches. O'Brien slipped through first, then Kowalski, then Ruiz, then Danny. The gate swung shut behind them. They were inside the compound. The main building was 40 feet ahead. 2 guards at the entrance, standing under a single light bulb. Danny could see their faces. One was smoking. The other looked bored, shifting weight from foot to foot. The interior courtyard was dark, except for ambient light from the entrance. No sign of the roaming guards. Danny pointed right. O'Brien nodded and moved along the wall, circling toward the entrance from the side. The team followed in single file, hugging shadows. 20 feet, 15 feet, 10 feet. The smoking guard flicked his cigarette away. It landed 3 feet from Danny's position, glowing orange in the dark. The guard turned back to his partner, said something in German. They both laughed. O'Brien was 5 feet behind them now, emerging from shadow like a spirit. The smoking guard sensed movement, started to turn. O'Brien's arm locked around his throat. The guard made a choking sound, struggled, went limp in 8 seconds. O'Brien lowered him silently to the ground. The second guard reached for his rifle. Kowalski was already moving, knife in hand. The guard opened his mouth to shout. Kowalski's blade went into his throat, just above the collarbone, angled upward, severing the carotid. The guard collapsed without a sound. Blood pooled on the stone steps. 2 down, 5 to go. Danny tried the main door. Locked. He pulled out a tension wrench and pick from his pocket. Tools from the locksmith shop, carried through boot camp, across the Atlantic, through 6 months of war. His hands were shaking. He forced them steady, inserted the tension wrench, raked the pins. The lock clicked open in 15 seconds. They entered a hallway lit by kerosene lamps. Wooden floors, Persian rug, paintings on the walls. The Germans had made themselves comfortable. Danny could hear voices from upstairs, speaking German, casual conversation. Radio music played softly somewhere to the left. The roaming interior guards. O'Brien pointed to the staircase, then to himself. He was going up. Danny shook his head. Too risky. O'Brien mouthed, "Guards." He was right. They couldn't leave armed men behind them. O'Brien started up the stairs, each step deliberate, testing for creaks. Kowalski followed. Ruiz stayed with Danny, covering the hallway. Danny moved left, following the music. It led to a study, desk, filing cabinets, radio on a side table playing static-filled German broadcast. One guard sat in a leather chair, feet up, half asleep. Danny approached from behind. The guard's eyes opened. Danny clamped the chloroform rag over his nose and mouth. The guard bucked, trying to scream, clawing at Danny's arms. Danny held on. 15 seconds, 20 seconds. The guard went slack. 3 down, 4 to go. Footsteps on the stairs. Danny spun, knife ready. O'Brien appeared in the doorway, gave a thumbs up. 2 more guards neutralized upstairs. 5 down, 2 to go. The roaming guards in the courtyard. They regrouped in the hallway. Danny checked his watch. 1:08 a.m. 21 minutes elapsed. The shift change was at 2:00 a.m. 52 minutes to find the documents, locate the resistance contact, and extract. He pointed toward the back of the house. The courtyard guards had to come inside eventually. They could wait, or they could hunt. Ruiz tapped Danny's arm, pointed to a window. The courtyard guards were visible outside, standing near a well, sharing a cigarette. They looked relaxed. Danny weighed the options. Waiting was safer, but burned time. Engaging meant risk, but maintained momentum. O'Brien made the decision for them, moving toward the back door. He eased it open. The courtyard guards didn't notice. They were 20 feet away, backs turned. O'Brien crossed the distance in 4 seconds, silent as death. His fist caught the first guard at the base of the skull. A short, brutal punch that dropped him instantly. The second guard spun, reaching for his pistol. Kowalski tackled him from behind, bearing him to the ground, knife working. The guard spasmed once and went still. 7 guards neutralized. 0 alarms raised. 98 minutes since infiltration began. Danny ran back inside, climbed, and to the second floor. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 1 office. The office door was locked. He picked it in 20 seconds. Inside, filing cabinets, a desk covered in maps, radio equipment, German efficiency. Everything labeled, everything organized. He started pulling files, coastal defense positions, troop movements, communication protocols. He stuffed them into a canvas bag. A sound behind him. Danny spun, knife ready. A man stood in the doorway, French, mid-40s, hollow-eyed, wearing civilian clothes, the resistance contact. "American?" the man whispered in accented English. "Yes, we're leaving, now. There are documents, hidden panel, behind the... Show me." The Frenchman crossed to a bookshelf, pressed a specific spine. A panel swung open. Inside, more files, photographs, a map with red markings, showing German defensive positions along the Normandy coast. Danny grabbed everything. "Can you walk?" "Yes. They keep me locked in the cellar, but I can walk." "Then let's go." They descended the stairs. O'Brien, Kowalski, and Ruiz waited in the hallway, weapons ready. Danny showed them the Frenchman. O'Brien nodded, pointed toward the exit. They moved through the main door, across the courtyard, through the gate. The perimeter guard's rotation would bring them back to the northwest corner in 4 minutes. They had to be gone. They ran. The Frenchman stumbled twice. Ruiz caught him, half-carried him, kept moving. 200 yards to the tree line. Danny's lungs burned. His legs felt like concrete. The canvas bag dug into his shoulder. 100 yards. 50 yards. The tree line swallowed them. Behind them, nothing. No shouts, no alarms. The compound remained dark and silent. They kept running, putting distance between themselves and the objective, moving through brush and farmland until Danny's watch read 1:52 a.m. 8 minutes before the shift change. 8 minutes before someone discovered 7 unconscious or dead guards and an empty office. They reached the Allied lines at 2:34 a.m. The sentries nearly shot them before Danny gave the password. They collapsed behind the wire, gasping, shaking with adrenaline. The Frenchman thanked them in broken English. O'Brien started laughing, a high, almost hysterical sound. Kowalski threw up in a ditch. Ruiz just sat there, staring at nothing. Danny reported to Lieutenant Chen at 3:15 a.m. Chen was awake, waiting, looking like he'd aged 10 years. Danny handed him the canvas bag full of documents. Chen opened it, stared at the contents, looked up with an expression Danny couldn't read. "You actually did it," Chen said. "Yes, sir." 7 guards? 7 guards. No alarms. 0 friendly casualties. Chen sat down heavily in his chair. "Morrison is going to lose his mind." "Yes, sir." "This map. These documents. Vasquez, this could change D-Day planning. This is intelligence we didn't have 24 hours ago." The Frenchman said there's more. "He knows locations, fortifications, everything." Chen rubbed his face. "I need to wake up the colonel. You and your team need to write after-action reports. Every detail, every second. This has to be documented." Danny nodded. He felt numb, disconnected, like he was watching himself from outside his body. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. No one had died. The mission was complete. The manual was wrong. Captain Morrison arrived at headquarters at 4:30 a.m., summoned by the colonel. Danny watched him read the after-action report, watched his face cycle through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been shame. Morrison didn't speak to Danny. He spoke to Lieutenant Chen, voice clipped and professional. "This operation was unauthorized," Morrison said. "Lieutenant Chen, you will face disciplinary action for approving tactics outside established doctrine." "Yes, sir," Chen said. "It was worth it." Morrison looked at the map again, at the intelligence hall, at the photographs of German positions that would save hundreds of lives during the invasion. He looked at Danny. "Corporal Vasquez," Morrison said slowly, "what you did tonight was reckless, dangerous, and violated every principle of military tactical doctrine." "Yes, sir." "It was also effective." Morrison left without another word. Danny never received an official commendation. The mission report was classified, but something changed in the days that followed. Other intelligence officers heard about the silent entry. They asked questions. How did you time the guards? How did you neutralize them without noise? How did you pick the locks? Danny answered reluctantly at first, then more openly as he realized they were actually listening. Officers who'd dismissed him as a radio operator with delusions started treating him like someone who understood tactics. By March 20th, Danny had briefed 6 different units on silent infiltration techniques. By March 25th, the division had authorized a special training program teaching hand-to-hand combat, lock-picking, timing analysis, silent movement. They didn't call it Vasquez's method officially, but everyone knew where it came from. The intelligence from the March 15th raid reached Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force on March 18th. Analysts spent 4 days verifying the documents. On March 22nd, they confirmed the information was genuine. Current German defensive positions along the Normandy coast, including minefields, strong points, and troop deployments the Allies hadn't known existed. D-Day planning officers used the intelligence to modify landing zones and adjust assault tactics. Conservative estimates credited that intelligence with saving between 200 and 300 Allied lives during the first 48 hours of the Normandy invasion. The Frenchman who provided it received asylum in England after the war. He never spoke publicly about the raid. Neither did Danny. The German High Command learned about the raid on March the 16th, when the shift change discovered 7 casualties and missing intelligence. They investigated for 2 weeks, examining the compound for evidence of how the assault occurred. They found no artillery damage, no signs of explosives, no indication of a large force. Just 7 guards who'd been neutralized by what appeared to be 4 or 5 men using hand-to-hand combat and infiltration techniques. German intelligence officers issued warnings to all occupied headquarters: increase guard rotations, eliminate predictable patterns, add interior patrols, install alarm systems. The warnings went out on March 30th. By then, Allied Special Operations teams had already conducted 11 more silent infiltrations using variations of Danny's techniques. Each raid recovered intelligence, rescued resistance members, or eliminated high-value targets without firing a shot. The Germans called it Geistkrieg, ghost war. They couldn't predict it, couldn't defend against it, couldn't understand how small teams were penetrating security that should have been impenetrable. Their response was to pull forces from frontline positions to guard headquarters buildings, which weakened their combat strength. The Ghost War had a strategic impact far beyond the intelligence gathered. Captain Morrison never apologized to Danny, but he stopped dismissing enlisted men's tactical suggestions. In April 1944, he authorized 3 more silent infiltration operations based on intelligence Danny and others had gathered. 2 succeeded completely. 1 ended in a firefight that killed 3 Americans but still secured the objective. Morrison wrote in his after-action report, "Non-traditional tactics show promise when applied by properly trained personnel." Lieutenant Chen received a formal reprimand for authorizing the March 15th operation without proper clearance. He also received a private commendation from a colonel at SHAEF who understood what the intelligence meant for D-Day. Chen made captain in June 1944. He survived the war, went to law school, became a judge in California. He and Danny exchanged letters until Chen died in 1987. Frank O'Brien, Pete Kowalski, and Carlos Ruiz all survived the war. O'Brien returned to Chicago, opened a boxing gym, trained kids from his neighborhood for 40 years. Kowalski took over his family's butcher shop in Detroit, never talked about the war, except to say he'd done his job. Ruiz went back to San Antonio, worked as a hunting guide, died in a truck accident in 1968. They held a reunion every March 15th for 23 years, just the 4 of them, never discussing details, just sharing a drink to men who weren't there. Danny Vasquez came home to Los Angeles in December 1945. He went back to work at his uncle's locksmith shop on First Street. Customers who knew he'd been in the war sometimes asked if he'd seen action. He'd say yes and change the subject. He married a girl from the neighborhood in 1947, had 3 kids, lived in the same house in Boyle Heights his whole life. He fixed locks, installed security systems, advised the LAPD on burglary prevention techniques in the 1960s. He received no medals for the March 15th operation. The Army classified it until 1974, when a historian researching D-Day intelligence discovered the after-action reports in a file box at the National Archives. The historian published a paper in 1976 detailing how a Corporal V had conducted an unauthorized raid that recovered crucial intelligence. By then, Danny was 62 years old, running the locksmith shop his uncle had left him. A reporter from the Los Angeles Times tracked him down in 1977, asked about the raid. Danny confirmed the basic facts, declined to elaborate. "We did what needed doing," he told the reporter. "A lot of men did more. I just happened to be good at locks." The reporter pushed for details. Danny refused. "Those 7 Germans, 5 of them died. 2 survived but were severely injured. They were just soldiers doing their job. Same as us. I don't celebrate killing men, even if it saved American lives. It was necessary. It wasn't glorious." The article ran on page 12 of the Metro section. Most people didn't notice it. The ones who did thought it was an interesting footnote to World War II history, nothing more. Danny went back to fixing locks. Modern special operations doctrine owes a significant debt to March 15th, 1944, though few people realize it. The techniques Danny Vasquez improvised that night, pattern analysis, timing exploitation, silent entry, minimal force application, became standard training for Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, and Special Forces units worldwide. They don't credit Vasquez's method because it was never officially called that. They just teach the tactics as if they've always existed. Military historians who study the evolution of special operations tactics usually point to World War II commando raids as the foundation of modern doctrine. They're not wrong, but they miss the specificity. It wasn't generals or strategic planners who invented silent infiltration. It was a corporal from East Los Angeles who grew up fixing locks and watching security patterns, who got tired of watching friends die, who risked court-martial to prove there was a better way. Danny Vasquez died in 1994 at age 79. His obituary in the Los Angeles Times mentioned his military service in one sentence. He served in the Army during World War II and participated in operations in France. No mention of March 15th. No mention of 7 guards, recovered intelligence, or lives saved. His family knew he'd done something important during the war, but Danny never explained what. He took the details to his grave. His funeral was attended by 60 people, family, friends, customers from the locksmith shop. One old man showed up who nobody recognized. He introduced himself as a colonel who'd served in France in 1944. He shook Danny's son's hand and said, "Your father saved my life. He saved a lot of lives. I wanted you to know that." Then he left. The colonel was Captain Harold Chen, though Danny's family didn't know that until after his death in 1987. Chen had written a letter to be delivered to Danny's family in the event of his death. The letter explained everything: the unauthorized raid, the intelligence recovered, the impact on D-Day, The lives saved. He ended with, "Danny Vasquez was the bravest man I ever knew, and the Army never gave him the credit he deserved." That's how progress actually happens in war. Not through committees analyzing doctrine in comfortable offices. Not through generals approving carefully planned operations that minimize risk to reputations. Through sergeants and corporals who watch their friends die, who see the flaws in the system, who risk everything to prove there's a better way. Through men like Danny Vasquez, who understood that sometimes the manual is wrong, and sometimes saving lives requires breaking rules. The Ghost War march through June 1944 saved an estimated 400–600 Allied lives through recovered intelligence and eliminated threats. Those numbers are conservative. They don't account for German forces diverted from combat positions to guard headquarters. They don't account for the psychological impact of unpredictable raids on enemy morale. They don't account for the operational doctrine that emerged from one unauthorized mission and rippled outward through every special operations unit for the next 80 years. Danny Vasquez never wanted credit. He wanted men like Jimmy Brennan, Mike Sullivan, and Eddie Martinez to stop dying for doctrine that valued strength over intelligence. On March 15, 1944, he proved his point. 7 guards neutralized, 0 alarms raised, 0 friendly casualties, 98 minutes from infiltration to extraction. One raid that changed how modern wars are fought. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Thank you for keeping these stories alive.